The night sky over the Atacama Desert was so clear that even the faintest stars seemed alive, shimmering with a cold pulse. It was the kind of silence only deserts could hold, a silence that pressed against the skin, ancient and endless. Elias Rahim stood outside his observatory dome, the wind tugging at his coat as he looked up at a sky that tonight was not behaving like itself. He had been watching a strange anomaly for 3 nights now, a flicker on his deep space spectrometer that refused to match any known celestial pattern. It wasn't a comet. It wasn't debris, it was deliberate. The light pulsed in intervals, 3, 5, pause 2, like an echo of intelligence bleeding through the void. His colleagues at the research center in Santiago dismissed it as interference. But Elias knew interference didn't move with intent. It didn't shift its frequency as if responding to being observed. Tonight, as the desert air cooled and the horizon swallowed the sun, the flicker had returned. Only this time, it was closer. He glanced at the readings again. The pulse was descending through the atmosphere. For a moment, his rational mind screamed that this was impossible. No object could enter at that angle without burning up, but the signal's amplitude was holding steady. He turned on the external cameras, his heart thundering in his chest as the image on the monitor bloomed into blinding light. Something cut through the desert sky, silent and magnificent, a beam of pale blue light that bent reality around it, shimmering like heat haze. Then it simply stopped. Hanging a few hundred meters above the cracked salt flats, it pulsed once more. 3, pause, 5, pause, 2. The entire desert trembled. Sand lifted in spirals as though gravity itself was being reprogrammed. Instruments inside the dome went wild. Magnetic readings, air pressure, even the atomic clocks began to drift. Elias stumbled backward. Then, through the shimmer, he saw it. It wasn't a ship in the way humans imagined ships. There was no metal, no structure, no symmetry. It was like a floating scar of light, a wound in the air, folding and unfolding upon itself. Reality seemed thinner around it, like a reflection seen through water. For a long minute, Elias forgot how to breathe. When the shimmer dimmed, he heard something, a vibration rather than a sound. It wasn't in the air, but inside his skull. A resonance that made his thoughts stumble. Words formed, not spoken, but impressed upon his consciousness. "We are late," he staggered, gripping the edge of a console. His mind tried to resist the intrusion, but the words came again, layered in tones that felt both mechanical and mournful. "You are not as expected."
"You see."
Who are you?" Elias whispered, the desert wind tearing the words away. The light expanded, folding outward until he could no longer tell where it ended. Within the glow, silhouettes moved, tall, elongated forms, translucent as glass. They did not walk, they flowed, as though made of liquid geometry. Elias's rationality began to fragment under the weight of the impossible. His instruments melted down, every display blanked, every circuit overloaded. And yet the thing hovered in perfect stillness. He took a hesitant step forward, raising a trembling hand as if approaching a wild animal. "I can see you," he said softly. "Are you real?" The desert floor rippled like disturbed water. He felt the resonance shift again, this time softer, curious. "You see, you hear, that is enough." Just as suddenly as it had appeared, the light collapsed in on itself. A silent implosion of brilliance that left the night even darker than before. The air crackled with ozone. The only sign anything had been there was a shallow depression in the salt crust, circular and smooth, still faintly glowing blue. Elias fell to his knees, shaking. He checked his watch. It was nearly 2 in the morning. But the strange thing was only minutes had passed on his equipment logs. The stars above had shifted as if hours had vanished. He knew he should call someone, the observatory board, the local police, anyone. But something in his mind whispered caution. It wasn't fear, it was a sense of significance. The kind of awe that comes from realizing the universe had just noticed you. Far away beyond the ridges, a faint afterglow still shimmered in the sky, and though he couldn't prove it yet, Elias knew that light was not leaving, it was waiting, for him, and for humanity. By dawn, the Atacama sky had returned to its usual clarity, the stars replaced by a sea of burning orange and gold. Dr. Elias Rahim hadn't slept. He sat slumped in front of the monitor banks, surrounded by the faint hum of machines trying to restart after the electromagnetic chaos of the night. Most of his data was gone. Hard drives fried, instruments unresponsive. The observatory's automated systems had rebooted dozens of times. But something, one camera feed from an old analog model he kept for redundancy, had survived. He played it back again for the 6th time that morning. The footage was grainy but unmistakable, the pulse of blue light, the shimmer in the air, the impossible folding shape. He could even see himself standing before it, frozen like an insect in amber. Then, at the end of the clip, something strange happened. The frame distorted, a sudden surge of static, and within that static, symbols flashed. Not letters, not numbers, but fractal patterns repeating in impossible geometry. He paused the frame, heart pounding. The shapes weren't random, they looked constructed. Intentional. He exported the still image, converted it to grayscale, and enhanced the contrast. The symbols appeared clearer, 12 distinct forms, circular and symmetrical like language built out of equations. He sent the image to his encrypted research drive. Then, after a long hesitation, he composed a short email to a colleague at the European Space Agency. Subject: possible atmospheric anomaly. Immediate analysis requested. He didn't mention the voice in his head. He didn't mention the not as expected. Even typing it felt like betraying something sacred. By noon the world already knew. Satellite imagery picked up a spike of energy over northern Chile at precisely the time Elias recorded the event. Social media flooded with blurry cell phone videos showing the desert sky lighting up like a second sunrise. The Chilean Air Force denied involvement. The UN issued a statement, and within 12 hours 3 black SUVs rolled up to the observatory gates. The woman who stepped out first was tall, composed, dressed in gray. Her ID badge bore the emblem of the United Nations Office for Extraterrestrial Observation, a task force created decades ago for what most thought was science fiction. "Dr. Rahim," she asked, her voice calm but edged with authority. "My name is Commander Solange Marquez. We need to speak with you." Inside the observatory's control room, Elias showed them everything. The surviving footage, the readings, the strange time drift. They listened silent, as the desert wind whispered outside. Finally Marquez leaned closer to the paused video. "These patterns," she murmured. "They appeared in multiple satellite captures as well. They're everywhere the anomaly was observed." "Everywhere?" Elias asked. "Yes," she said, her expression tightening. "And not just in Chile. We've detected low-level electromagnetic disturbances across the globe. Same pulse pattern." 3-5 pause 2. Elias stared at her. "So you're saying it's communicating?" "We're saying," Marquez replied, "it might already be in contact." That night, while they transmitted the video to a secure facility in Geneva, something else began to happen. Across several observatories worldwide, scientists reported the same kind of static patterns appearing in their recordings. In some places, even radio towers and power grids began to resonate faintly with the signal's rhythm. At first, it was thought to be interference. Then people started hearing it. Not through speakers in their minds. It began as a soft vibration, like a low hum that rose just above the edge of consciousness. Reports came from pilots, submarine crews, long-distance radio operators. The frequency matched perfectly to the pattern Elias had documented. Those affected described fleeting impressions, geometric visions, a sense of presence, words half-formed and vanishing before comprehension. By the second night, the phenomenon had a name: the whisper signal. Commander Marquez stayed in the observatory as transmissions continued. Her team set up field scanners, quantum spectrometers, even drones to monitor the residual glow left in the desert basin. Elias tried to keep his focus, but the same hum that plagued others had reached him too. Only for seconds, but unmistakable. When it came, it felt like someone standing just behind him, unseen, watching through his thoughts. During one of the midnight recordings, he heard the resonance sharpen. A soundless voice again, clearer this time. "We measure what you cannot name." He jerked upright, heart racing. Marquez noticed. "What is it?" she asked. Stepping clear. "That." "Hear what?" He swallowed hard. Never mind. But he knew what it meant. The contact was not random, it had found him first. Over the following days, things escalated. Radio telescopes from Australia to Finland reported synchronized pulses of light deep in the night sky. The same coordinates, the same point from which the Atacama signal had descended. Every attempt to triangulate the origin failed. The data curved back on itself, as if the signal refused to exist in three-dimensional space. Governments issued statements, each more cautious than the last. Markets trembled, communications flickered, and panic simmered quietly beneath the surface of civilization. Amid all this, Elias received a private encrypted message from an anonymous sender. It contained one line: "The patterns are a countdown." He stared at it for a long time, the chill in his spine deepening. When he enhanced the still frame again, the 12 geometric symbols, he realized that over time they were changing. Fading one by one, something was coming, and whatever it was, the world had less than 12 days before it arrived. By the 5th day, humanity's collective heartbeat had changed. The whisper signal was no longer a fringe anomaly. It was an unavoidable presence woven through the fabric of daily life. Television broadcasts flickered in rhythm with it. Seismographs registered ghost tremors matching its pulse. Even deep-sea sensors insulated beneath kilometers of water vibrated with the same impossible frequency, and everywhere, people were dreaming. Not ordinary dreams, shared ones. Across continents, languages, and time zones, reports poured in describing the same visions, a vast structure of light suspended in an endless void, surrounded by spiraling shapes of geometry too complex to name. In the dream there was always a voice, not loud but undeniable. It whispered a single phrase: "Mu, return what was borrowed." Elias had stopped trying to sleep days ago. The desert had become his prison of revelation and dread. Commander Marquez's team had transformed the observatory into a temporary base, filled with satellite uplinks, translation models, and fatigued scientists running on caffeine and fear. The air buzzed with tension and static. Elias sat hunched over his terminal, analyzing the fading geometric symbols again. 7 remained glowing faintly in the stored image. The rate of decay was precise, 1 every 24 hours. Like clockwork. Like a promise. He didn't realize Marquez had approached until her reflection appeared beside his on the screen. "You haven't eaten," she said. "I'm fine," he muttered. "It's changing again." She leaned closer. "Our linguists think the symbols aren't a language. They're instructions." "For what?" "We don't know. But the countdown, if that's what it is, ends next Wednesday." Outside, the desert shimmered with heat, but the wind carried a low metallic resonance, faint yet unending. Sometimes the sound shifted, forming almost musical tones, melancholic, deliberate. It was as if the atmosphere itself had learned to sing that night. As Marquez's team reviewed satellite telemetry, something new happened. A tremor, soft, measured, rolled across the Atacama. Power flickered and the pulse shifted pitch. Drones hovering above the salt flats recorded the event. The shallow crater where the light had once landed began to glow again. Only this time the glow pulsed in sync with the global signal. Within minutes, the hum grew into a deep harmonic vibration that rattled every window of the observatory. Elias ran outside, shielding his eyes as dust lifted in concentric waves. The blue light rose again from the crater, expanding slowly, breathing. He could feel it reverberating in his chest and his bones, like a second heartbeat. Marquez shouted into her radio, calling for the drone feed, but Elias couldn't look away. The light had formed, now fluid, spiraling. Shapes coalesced within it, familiar, hauntingly so, human silhouettes. He stumbled back. "It's mimicking us, no," Marquez said, staring in disbelief. "It's learning us." The glowing figures solidified, each one a perfect lattice of radiant geometry shaped like people. They stood motionless for a moment, then raised their heads in unison as if listening to something beyond human hearing. Then one of them turned, its faceless form orienting toward Elias. He heard the voice again. Clear, direct, inside him. Your pattern was incomplete. He could barely breathe. Uri cues. Remnants of those who passed before you. We remember what you have forgotten. Marquez raised her weapon instinctively, though she must have known it was useless. Dr. Rahim stepped back, but Elias didn't. He felt a strange calm. The fear that had paralyzed him for days melted into something deeper. Recognition. "You said you're late?" he said. "Late for what?" The figure tilted its head, light rippling through its body like waves across water. "Return restoration. Your kind was not meant to stand alone." The words hit him like thunder, yet he couldn't grasp their meaning. Restoration of what? He demanded, off memory. Before he could ask more, the light surged brighter, forcing them to shield their eyes. When it faded, the figures were gone. Only a deep circular indentation remained, smooth, glassy, radiating faint warmth. Marquez turned to Elias. "What did you hear?" He hesitated. "They said we've forgotten something. Something they came to restore." "Restore what?" "Civilization." He looked out across the desert, where the light still shimmered faintly on the horizon. "Maybe not civilization," he said quietly. "Maybe ourselves." The next day, satellite feeds detected identical craters forming spontaneously across the globe, 12 in total, mirroring the original number of symbols. Each emitted the same pulse frequency. Governments scrambled to contain information, but secrecy was impossible now. The entire planet could feel it. The whisper had become a chorus. In cities, streetlights flickered in sync. In hospitals, heart monitors glitched, displaying synchronized spikes across patients. The world's pulse had been hijacked, and everywhere people saw the same dream, a voice, a structure of light, and one phrase repeating endlessly: "The memory will return." Back in the desert, Elias finally understood what terrified him most. The voice wasn't alien, not truly. The longer he listened, the more it began to sound familiar, almost human, layered and ancient. That night, when he closed his eyes, he didn't dream of stars. He dreamed of Earth before humans. Oceans filled with shining shapes, consciousness not bound to flesh. Something vast and luminous that once was this world. and he woke with the terrible certainty that the visitors hadn't come from the stars at all. They were coming home. The seventh day began with silence. Not peace, silence. No birds, no engines, no human chatter carried over the desert wind. It was as if the world had paused to listen. Even the hum that had haunted humanity for a week seemed to draw a breath. Suspended in impossible anticipation in Santiago, entire districts stood powerless. Satellite networks had collapsed under waves of electromagnetic distortion. The global internet flickered like a dying heartbeat. Planes were grounded, communication lines severed, and the countdown, whatever it was, had reached its last 5 symbols. Dr. Elias Rahim hadn't left the observatory for 3 days. The air inside the dome smelled of ozone and sleeplessness. Commander Marquez's team had dwindled. Half of them had been evacuated under UN orders when the signal began to affect their neural activity. The rest were now monitoring from underground bunkers. Only Marquez stayed, despite the tremors under her eyes and the faint ringing in her skull that mirrored his own. 5 left, she said, her voice hoarse, staring at the digital overlay of the symbol sequence. If they fade at the same rate, that means 5 days. Maybe less. Elias leaned against the console, exhaustion carved deep into his face. Do you think we can stop it? She looked at him, wary but resolute. Stop what? We don't even know what it is. All we know is that every satellite, every telescope, every sensor sees the same thing now. She brought up a feed from the Global Observation Network. Dozens of craters across the world, each glowing with the same slow pulse, appeared on the map: the North Atlantic, the Sahara, Siberia, Tibet, the Great Plains, the frozen tundra of Antarctica, each one a node in some unseen pattern etched across Earth's surface. It's symmetrical, they're forming a shape. Yes, Marcus said softly. A network, or maybe a circuit. He zoomed in, connecting the locations, mentally tracing lines across continents. A circuit, he murmured. A vessel. Marquez frowned. A vessel for what? Elias hesitated. Energy, or consciousness. As night fell, the desert air turned colder than usual. Stars blinked like scattered embers above the horizon, but their light seemed distorted. Bent by unseen currents, the hum returned, lower this time, resonating not through the ears but through the ground itself. Elias stepped outside the dome. Every cell in his body vibrated with that sound. He knew instinctively that the resonance wasn't just global. It was personal. It was synchronizing with something inside him. He fell to his knees, pressing his hands to the sand. A flash tore through his mind, images that didn't belong to him. Vast oceans filled with light instead of water. Mountains that breathed. Skies that shimmered with thought. Beings of energy drifting like tides, merging and parting without form or name. Then darkness, a rupture. The image of a planet splitting in grief, its luminous inhabitants burning away, scattering their essence into the void. When he came to, Marquez was beside him, shaking him gently. Elias, talk to me, what did you see? He tried to speak, but his throat was dry. They're not aliens, he rasped. They're us. Or what came before us. Her eyes narrowed. What do you mean before us? Before humanity? Before evolution as we know it? They were here, they were Earth. Consciousness made of energy, pure, collective. Something happened, something that broke them apart. They scattered, became dormant, maybe matter itself is their memory. And now they're calling themselves back together. Marquez stared at him as if weighing his sanity, but then the ground trembled again and the desert horizon rippled with light, every crater around the globe pulsing simultaneously. The pattern had synchronized. Elias stood dazed. They're awakening the planet. Over the next hours, events unfolded faster than any human system could comprehend. The pulse amplified tenfold. Magnetic poles began to fluctuate, shifting like living currents. Entire flocks of birds moved in synchronized spirals. Whales surfaced and sang in harmonic tones no scientist had ever recorded. The atmosphere glowed faintly even in daylight, a shimmering aurora enveloping the entire world. The dreams intensified too. People no longer simply saw the light, they were the light. They described merging with oceans of memory, feeling connected to every heartbeat on the planet. Fear gave way to something stranger, a collective awe, as if humanity were being invited to remember what it once was. But not everyone welcomed it. Governments declared states of emergency. Religious leaders called it divine judgment, others madness. Power grids collapsed as cities flickered between darkness and luminous skies. At the observatory, Marquez struggled to maintain communication with Geneva. Static consumed every transmission. Her earpiece crackled with fragments. Containment impossible, global synchronization accelerating, evacuation recommended. She threw it aside. We can't evacuate, she muttered. There's nowhere left to go. Elias stood at the window, his reflection flickering in the blue glow. Maybe we're not supposed to. She turned to him sharply. You sound like you want this to happen. I don't, he said quietly. But what if this is not destruction? What if this is restoration? If they were once part of this world, maybe they're not taking it back. They're healing it. Marquez stared at him, torn between belief and duty. And humanity? What happens to us in your version of healing? He met her gaze, voice trembling. Maybe we stop being separate. Outside, the desert shuddered once more. The final 5 symbols on the screen began to pulse in rhythm, faster and faster, as if responding to something alive within the code. Elias could feel the vibration deep in his skull now, each pulse a whisper forming words just beyond comprehension. He closed his eyes. The voice returned, vast and sorrowful. All fragments must remember. The cycle ends when you awaken. He gasped, falling backward. Marquez caught him, panic flashing across her face. What did it say? He opened his eyes slowly. It said the end is not the end. It's the remembering. Lightning forked silently across the cloudless sky. The final symbols flickered once, then the 5th one vanished. 4 days left, and the world was no longer waiting. It was listening. The world held its breath. Then 2. And everywhere reality seemed to tremble as if preparing to shed its skin. In the Atacama, the air itself shimmered with a faint blue radiance. Night no longer brought darkness, just a deeper hue of light. The hum had grown gentle, steady, almost like a heartbeat. Cities across the planet flickered in unison, lights dimming and returning in waves as if the entire world was breathing together. Dr. Elias Rahim no longer needed instruments. He felt the countdown pulsing in his chest, whispering in his bones. The symbols were nearly gone now, 2 faint sigils fading like dying embers on the observatory screens. Commander Marquez barely left his side anymore. Her face was pale from sleepless nights, her eyes hollow yet shining with quiet awe. What happens when it reaches 0? She asked softly. Elias didn't answer, because in truth he already knew. He didn't know how he knew, but the understanding was there, woven through his mind like a melody too ancient for language. The second to last symbol faded that night. The hum deepened, vibrating through the crust of the earth. Seas rose and fell in perfect rhythm. Clouds gathered in fractal spirals visible even from orbit. The aurora that had begun at the poles now stretched across the equator, painting every continent in ghostly blue fire. When the final day came, the world stopped pretending it could resist. Every remaining government broadcast one last message urging calm. Faiths of all kinds prayed, sang, or fell silent. Families gathered not in panic but in wonder, because even the most fearful among them could feel it now. That sense of belonging, of something vast and benevolent stirring behind the veil of the visible. Elias stood outside the observatory at dawn, the horizon washed in pale silver. Marquez stood beside him, her radio long dead, her weapon forgotten. They didn't speak, there was nothing left to say. At precisely 0400 UTC, the last symbol vanished, and the sky opened, no thunder, no explosions. Just a soundless bloom of light that swept across the planet faster than thought. For a single instant, every particle of air shimmered with awareness. Every shadow glowed. Every living thing, human, animal, or otherwise, froze, lifted, illuminated from within. Elias gasped as the desert dissolved into brilliance. The ground beneath him melted into flowing geometry, infinite and radiant. He felt weightless, suspended in something that was not space and not time. Then came the voice. Not one but countless, echoing through every mind on earth. The memory returns. Images cascaded through him, earth as it once was, before oceans cooled, before matter hardened. A consciousness vast and fluid, existing in perfect unity with the planet itself. It remembered dividing itself into smaller forms, cells, organisms, species, so it could experience itself in infinite ways. Humanity was one such fragment. But somewhere in that endless branching, the memory had been lost. The fragments had forgotten the whole, and now, after eons of silence, the planet had finally sung itself awake. Elias could see everything. He could see through time, the birth of mountains, the fall of civilizations, the slow, stubborn rise of humanity. He felt the pulse of every living heart, each one a note in a single grand symphony. Marquez floated beside him. Tears streaming upward into light. Is this death? She whispered, her voice barely human. Elias smiled faintly. No, he said. This is remembering. The world became transparent, cities, oceans, forests, all shimmering as if drawn from glass and light. People everywhere cried, laughed, fell to their knees. Some reached out, touching the air as if greeting something they'd always known was missing. Then, one by one, the craters around the world erupted, not with fire but with pure radiance. From each rose shapes of energy, vast and graceful, spiraling into the sky. They weren't ships, they weren't beings, they were echoes. The final synthesis of the forgotten consciousness returning to itself. The pulse reached its crescendo, the hum merging into a single, resonant tone that made the entire planet tremble. And then, quiet. For a long moment, nothing moved. The light dimmed, the aurora faded, and the blue glow receded into the soil. The wind returned, gentle and cool. Birds sang again. The observatory stood intact, dust settling around it. Elias lay on the ground, breathing heavily. His body felt changed, lighter, as though gravity had relaxed its grip. Marquez sat beside him, staring up at the now ordinary sky. "It's over," she whispered. He nodded slowly. "No," he said. She turned to him. "What do you mean?" He pointed toward the eastern horizon. The sun was rising, but not as it used to. Its light shimmered faintly with iridescent threads, as if the air itself were alive. The colors were richer, deeper, every hue more vivid, more present. Elias closed his eyes and listened. Somewhere beneath the surface of the earth, a soft, rhythmic vibration pulsed, a heartbeat, not mechanical, not geological, but living. Days later, reports emerged of inexplicable phenomena. Crops growing in desolate soil, polluted rivers clearing overnight, diseases vanishing without cause. Yet for all the miracles, there was no sign of the luminous entities, no ships, no voices. Only the lingering hum, soft, steady, like the memory of a song that refused to fade. Elias recorded his final log entry from the observatory before the UN reclaimed it. His voice trembled as he spoke, not from fear but reverence. If we were fragments of something larger, then this was not an invasion. It was an awakening. They didn't come to take Earth from us. They came to remind us that we were never apart from it, that the universe was never silent. We just forgot how to listen. He paused, looking toward the horizon where faint blue light still danced beneath the sun. We thought we were the first to reach for the stars. Maybe we were only remembering how. That night, as he stood alone beneath the vast, starlit sky, the hum returned once more, gentle like a distant voice humming a lullaby. He smiled, eyes glistening, and somewhere deep within the earth, or perhaps within humanity itself, something whispered back, "Welcome home."